My beloved child. The photograph was still lying face down on the psychic's table when your soulmate covered their mouth and began to cry. Not because the woman had predicted a fortune. Not because she had promised some impossible future. She had actually refused to talk about numbers at all. Instead, she had pointed to one tiny detail beside your photograph, a folded receipt with a handwritten date, and asked a question neither your soulmate nor the third party had prepared for. Who did they give up something for on this day? The room went completely still. Only minutes earlier, nobody had expected tears. The third party had entered that quiet room almost certain the visit would settle an argument that had been growing for weeks. They were not there because they believed every word a psychic might say. In fact, part of the reason they suggested going was the opposite. They wanted another person to look at the situation without being emotionally attached to you. Your soulmate had been speaking differently about you lately. More carefully. More protectively. Whenever someone questioned your intentions, your soulmate no longer joined the conversation as easily as before. They had started remembering details they once ignored, the way you rarely advertised what you were working toward, the way you seemed uncomfortable discussing money as a measure of worth, the way you could disappear into responsibility without explaining where all your energy had gone. The third party interpreted that silence another way. Maybe you were hiding something. Maybe the image your soulmate had built around you was more impressive than reality. Maybe the quietness was not humility at all, but avoidance. That suspicion became stronger after one ordinary conversation about money. Someone had casually mentioned expensive things, future plans, and what a successful life was supposed to look like. Your soulmate had remembered something you once said. A simple sentence about wanting enough stability that the people you loved would never have to feel helpless during a difficult season. The third party had laughed softly. People say things like that when they want to sound deep. Your soulmate did not answer. That silence became the beginning of the visit. A few days later, the third party found the psychic through someone they knew. Nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. They would bring a photograph, explain very little, ask what impression she received, and leave. The third party expected the woman to describe someone inconsistent, financially uncertain, perhaps overly idealistic. Your soulmate agreed to go, but for a different reason they would not admit aloud. They wanted somebody to tell them they had not been foolish for believing there was more to you than people could immediately see. On the afternoon of the appointment, rain tapped lightly against the window of the small upstairs room. There were no theatrical decorations, no strange ceremony, only a wooden table, 3 chairs, a lamp, and a notebook that remained closed when they sat down. Your soulmate placed their phone on the table. The screen displayed your photograph. The third party placed something beside it, a printed screenshot of an old conversation in which money had been mentioned. One sentence had been underlined. It was something you had apparently written after being asked why you were working so hard when nobody seemed to notice. I'm trying to build something I won't have to explain yet. To the third party, that sentence sounded suspiciously vague. To your soulmate, it had always sounded unfinished. The psychic read it once. Then again. Her expression did not become amazed. It became thoughtful. Do you have anything else connected to this person? She asked. Your soulmate searched through the pocket of a bag almost absent-mindedly. They were not expecting to find anything useful. Their fingers touched a small folded piece of paper that had been sitting there for months. A receipt. Nothing impressive. No enormous purchase. No luxurious item. It came from a small restaurant. Your soulmate stared at it because they had forgotten they kept it. That receipt came from a day when you had insisted on paying for a simple meal even though, as they later learned, your own week had been difficult. They had teased you at the time for checking the total twice. You smiled, brushed it away, and changed the subject. The psychic did not know any of that. Yet instead of studying your picture, she reached toward the receipt. She did not touch it immediately. Why is this here? Your soulmate gave a confused little laugh. I don't know. I forgot about it. The third party leaned back, almost relieved. A forgotten restaurant receipt hardly seemed capable of proving anything. Then the psychic noticed the handwritten date on the back. Your soulmate had written it there months ago because the evening had mattered for a completely different reason. It was the first time you had spoken seriously about the kind of life you wanted to create. Not the car, not the house, not the number in an account, but the feeling you wanted your future home to have. Calm. Enough. Safe. Nobody having to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. The psychic looked from the date to your photograph. Her voice became quieter. This person does not seem obsessed with appearing wealthy. The third party folded their arms. That doesn't mean they're genuine. No, the psychic replied. It doesn't. That answer surprised everyone. For a moment, your soulmate thought the entire visit might confirm the doubt they had been trying not to feel. Then the woman continued. But people reveal their priorities in what they protect when resources are limited. I'm not interested in how impressive this person looks when things are easy. I'd want to know what they repeatedly choose when something has to be sacrificed. That sentence followed your soulmate into a memory. There had been a month when your messages became shorter. You never complained. You simply sounded tired. At the time, your soulmate had wondered whether your feelings were changing. The third party had even suggested it. If they cared that much, they would make more time. Your soulmate believed that for a while. Now, sitting across from the psychic, they remembered what they had discovered later. During that same period, you had quietly taken on an extra responsibility for someone close to you. Not because anyone demanded praise. Not because there was something to gain. You simply saw a problem and decided you could carry part of it. You had never connected that responsibility to your absence. You had allowed yourself to be misunderstood rather than turn another person's hardship into evidence of your goodness. The realization unsettled your soulmate more than any mystical prediction could have. The third party noticed their expression. What? Your soulmate shook their head. Nothing. Except it was not nothing anymore. Stay with this moment, because the detail they nearly dismissed was beginning to explain a pattern. The psychic finally turned the photograph over and studied it briefly, then pushed it back toward them. You came here asking whether this person is fake, she said. But fake in what way? The third party answered first. Maybe the future they talk about isn't real. Maybe they act like they're building towards something when they're not. The psychic opened her notebook for the first time. She drew 3 short lines. Under the first, she wrote appearance. Under the second, intention. Under the third, behavior. Those are not the same thing. The room changed after that. No one was talking about mysterious predictions now. They were examining evidence. Your soulmate mentioned how you rarely bought things simply to impress people. The third party countered that being careful could also mean having less than you claimed. Your soulmate admitted that was possible. Then they remembered another detail. Once, when a plan had fallen apart because of money, you had not blamed anyone. You reorganized quietly. Something you wanted was postponed. Nobody saw the disappointment except your soulmate, because your voice had changed for a few seconds when you said, "It's fine. There are more important things right now." At the time, that sounded ordinary. Now it sounded like evidence. Not evidence that you were secretly rich. Evidence that when forced to choose between looking successful and protecting stability, you were willing to let appearance lose. The psychic tapped the handwritten date on the receipt. That is what interests me. Your soulmate stared at her. Why? Because people who have known financial uncertainty sometimes react in one of 2 ways. Some become consumed by proving they escaped it. Others become focused on preventing the people they love from feeling the same insecurity. She paused. I cannot tell you anyone's financial future from a photograph. I can tell you that the stories you're describing point towards someone who seems to associate money with responsibility more than performance. Your soulmate's eyes dropped. For the first time that afternoon, the third party did not immediately disagree. That was the first answer. You had not been discovered as secretly wealthy. You had been discovered as someone whose relationship with money was shaped by what money had once been unable to fix. And that opened a much harder question. What had happened to teach you that? The psychic asked your soulmate whether you ever spoke about difficult periods from your past. Not much. Do they complain about being underestimated? No. Do they try to prove people wrong? Your soulmate almost smiled. Sometimes I think they stopped explaining themselves a long time ago. The psychic looked toward the rain-covered window. That can happen when a person realizes explanations cost energy they need for building. The words landed differently than expected. Your soulmate remembered moments they had mistaken for distance. Times you had become unusually focused. Times you had declined things without explaining why. Times you had said you were handling something and left it there. Maybe every silence had not been secrecy. Some of it had been discipline. That thought offered relief for only a moment, because the third party noticed a contradiction. If they are so responsible, they said carefully, why haven't they shown more of what they're building? A fair question. The psychic did not defend you. Instead, she turned toward your soulmate. Do you know what they're building? Your soulmate opened their mouth. Nothing came out. They knew fragments. A goal mentioned once. A plan that had been revised. A dream you stopped discussing because every time you described it too early, somebody found a reason it would fail. That realization hurt. Your soulmate had believed they understood your ambition. Suddenly they saw how little of its structure you had actually revealed. The third party seemed to think this proved their point. Exactly. Yet the psychic was looking at something else now. The old screenshot. She moved it closer. The underlined sentence waited there again. I'm trying to build something I won't have to explain yet. Earlier, it had sounded evasive. Now its meaning had changed. The psychic placed the receipt beside the message. One showed what you said. The other showed what you did. The words were private ambition. The receipt was quiet generosity during a difficult week. Neither proved a fortune. Together, they suggested something far more personal. Your desire for stability had never been only about yourself. Your soulmate pressed two fingers against their forehead. A memory surfaced that they had tried not to revisit. There had been a time when they needed reassurance from you, and you seemed distracted. They had taken it personally. Later that same evening, you returned with the exact thing they needed handled, something practical, unglamorous, easily overlooked. You had not given a perfect emotional speech. You had solved a problem. For months, your soulmate remembered the missing speech. They had almost forgotten the action. Their eyes filled. The third party noticed immediately. Why are you crying? Your soulmate laughed once through the emotion, embarrassed by it. Because I think I kept measuring them by what they weren't saying. Silence answered. This was the moment they thought they finally understood. The psychic had not exposed you as fake. She had helped them see that the version of you they doubted was incomplete because they had been looking for visible proof while many of your priorities were expressed through ordinary choices. That could have ended the reading. It did not. The psychic reached for the receipt again and noticed something on the reverse side beneath the handwritten date. A second line. Faded. Your soulmate had forgotten it was there. 3 words, written in your handwriting. Not theirs. Your soulmate stared. How did that get there? The third party leaned closer. The psychic slid the paper toward them. Your soulmate remembered. That night at the restaurant, while they had stepped away from the table, you borrowed a pen. You must have written the words beneath the date they had added later. The message said, "For the quiet future." Nothing else. No amount. No promise. No grand declaration. Your soulmate's face changed immediately. Because those 3 words belonged to a conversation only the two of you would understand. Months earlier, you had been talking about dreams. Your soulmate joked about wanting something extravagant one day. You laughed, then said the thing you wanted most sounded much less impressive. A quiet future. They asked what that meant. You described mornings without panic. Bills handled without fear. A home where bad news did not automatically become a crisis. Enough room to help someone without destroying your own foundation. Work that meant something. Peace that did not depend on pretending. At the time, your soulmate called it sweet. Then life became complicated, and the conversation disappeared beneath everything else. Yet you had remembered it. You had written those words on an ordinary receipt. The psychic watched your soulmate turn the paper over and over. This, she said, is why your original question may have been the wrong question. The third party no longer looked triumphant. Their voice had softened. What should the question have been? Not whether this person has enough to impress you. She glanced at your soulmate. Whether their choices matched the life they said they wanted to create. No one spoke. The answer was not perfect. You had made mistakes. You had gone quiet when communication would have been easier. You had carried things alone until people sometimes assumed you did not care. There were plans that had taken longer than expected, decisions that did not work, moments when caution looked like hesitation. Yet this was exactly why the discovery felt believable. Your strength was not that everything had always gone well. It was that difficulty had taught you to think beyond the next impression. Some struggles had made you quieter, yes. They had also made you notice consequences. You learned that generosity without boundaries could leave everyone unstable. That earning mattered, but so did protecting what was earned. That helping someone today meant little if tomorrow you had nothing left to stand on. That a peaceful future was rarely built through one dramatic victory, sometimes it was built through hundreds of unnoticed decisions. Your soulmate began crying harder then. Not because the psychic had guaranteed anything. Because they remembered how often they had mistaken your preparation for absence. How often they had wondered whether your silence meant you were drifting away when, in reality, you might have been trying to become someone capable of staying without constantly falling apart under pressure. The third party looked down at their hands. Their doubt had not come from cruelty. They had seen your soulmate disappointed before and wanted to protect them from believing another beautiful story. Yet even they could see that the evidence on the table did not resemble someone manufacturing an image. It resembled someone still becoming. Someone unfinished. Someone trying. The psychic let the silence remain. Then she asked one final question. Did this person ever lose something important because they chose responsibility over what they personally wanted? Your soulmate froze. The crying stopped for half a second. There was a memory. A specific one. They had never connected it to money. They had never connected it to the quiet future. And until that exact moment, they had certainly never connected it to themselves. Your soulmate slowly reached for their phone. Their fingers trembled as they opened an old conversation and scrolled far beyond the messages they usually revisited. There, they whispered. The third party leaned in. A message from you appeared on the screen, sent long ago during one of the hardest stretches between you. Your soulmate read it once. Then covered their mouth again. The psychic looked at the screen, then at the receipt, then back at your soulmate. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. So that is why. Your soulmate lifted tear-filled eyes. Why what? The psychic placed one finger beside the old message. Why this became personal for you? She drew the receipt closer, lined it up beside your words on the phone, and began to explain the one sacrifice your soulmate had never realized was connected to them. The reason you're crying, she said softly, is because when they gave that up, they weren't preparing only for their own future. They were preparing for the two of you. Your soulmate did not move. For several seconds, the room seemed to become smaller around those three words. The rain still traced faint lines down the window. The lamp still cast the same warm circle across the table. The third party was still sitting only a few feet away. Yet something about the old message glowing on the phone had separated your soulmate from everything else. Because they finally remembered what had happened during that period. You had been close to something you wanted. Not some fantasy. Not an impossible fortune. Something practical. Something you had worked towards slowly enough that almost nobody understood how much patience it had required. You had saved, adjusted, waited, and turned down smaller comforts because you were trying to create a foundation that belonged to you. Then something changed. Your soulmate needed help. They never directly asked you for money. In fact, that was exactly why the connection had remained invisible for so long. Their problem had appeared in another form. Stress, uncertainty, a situation that threatened to disrupt something important in their life. You listened. You asked a few practical questions. Then you said very little. Several days later, the problem became easier. At the time, your soulmate assumed circumstances had simply worked themselves out. Now the old conversation revealed another possibility. The message on the screen had been sent the same week you quietly postponed your own plan. I can rebuild the amount, you had written. Some things matter more when the timing is right. Your soulmate had read that sentence years ago as though you were speaking only about yourself. The psychic saw the change in their face. You remember now. Your soulmate nodded slowly. I thought they changed their mind. About what? The answer came reluctantly. Something they had been saving for. The third party looked between them. Did they ever say why? No. That single word hurt more than an accusation would have. Because suddenly your soulmate could see the shape of an old misunderstanding. You had lost momentum on something you cared about, yet instead of telling them the sacrifice you made, you acted as though the delay meant nothing. And they had interpreted that quietness as inconsistency. The psychic leaned back. Be careful, she said. A connection between two events does not automatically prove one caused the other. Memories become emotional very quickly. It was a grounded reminder, and your soulmate needed it. So they searched. Not for signs. For evidence. They opened older messages, moving through months of forgotten conversations. Some were ordinary. A photograph of a meal. A joke that no longer made sense. A short message saying you were tired. A promise to call later. Then a date appeared. Your soulmate stopped scrolling. This was the day. The third party leaned closer. What day? The day everything got handled. There was a message from your soulmate thanking you for helping them think through the problem. Your reply was almost frustratingly simple. Glad it worked out. Nothing else. No mention of cost. No reminder of what you had done. No attempt to collect emotional credit. The psychic glanced at the receipt again. For the quiet future. Your soulmate's eyes filled for a second time, but the emotion had changed. The first tears had come from surprise. These came from recognition. They were realizing that some of the moments they remembered as proof you were emotionally difficult might have contained another story underneath them. Not perfection. Not sainthood. Just choices they had never fully seen. The third party broke the silence. If this is true, why hide it? That question mattered. Your soulmate looked toward the psychic, almost hoping she had an answer. Instead, the woman returned the question. Did this person grow up believing help should be announced? Your soulmate thought about it. No. Do they become uncomfortable when people praise them too much? A faint smile appeared through the tears. Yes. Do they tend to say, "It was nothing," even when it clearly wasn't? The smile disappeared. Yes. The psychic nodded. Then hiding a sacrifice may not have been a strategy. It may simply be how they learned to carry responsibility. That explanation did not erase the cost of silence. Your soulmate knew there had been times when your refusal to explain yourself created distance that could have been avoided. Quiet generosity could still become confusing. Strength could become isolation when a person carried everything alone. Yet the discovery softened something. They no longer saw your silence only as a locked door. Some of it had been a shield around other people's dignity. Some of it had been exhaustion. And some of it had come from learning that when you announced every sacrifice, generosity could begin to feel like a debt someone else was expected to repay. The third party stared at the old messages. I still don't understand the fake part. The psychic turned toward them. What did you expect me to find? The question caught them off guard. After a pause, they admitted it. I thought there would be a mismatch. Big talk, no substance. Maybe promises about a future that sounded better than anything they were actually doing. Because? The third party hesitated. Because I've seen that happen to people. There it was. Not malice. Memory. Someone in their own past had once talked beautifully about plans they never intended to build. They had watched promises become excuses. They had seen another person wait too long for actions that never came. So when they looked at you, private, slow-moving, reluctant to display progress, they recognized the outline of something they feared. They had filled the missing pieces with an old story. Your soulmate looked at them differently now. For the first time that afternoon, neither person was trying to win. The psychic tapped the table gently. This is why assumptions are dangerous. Sometimes the same behavior comes from completely different motives. Silence can hide dishonesty. Silence can also hide effort. Caution can come from fear. Caution can also come from experience. A person who talks little about their plans may have nothing behind the words. Or they may have learned that explaining a foundation while they are still pouring it invites opinions they do not have the energy to manage. The evidence mattered more than the image. And slowly, piece by piece, your soulmate began remembering the evidence. There was the time you repaired something rather than replacing it because the money had another purpose. The evening you declined an expensive plan and made a joke so nobody would feel awkward. The month you seemed strangely disciplined, only for someone close to you to later receive help they never publicly connected to you. The way you saved screenshots of useful information but rarely screenshots of things meant only to impress. The way your future plans always included the word stable more often than rich. Each detail looked almost meaningless alone. Together they formed a pattern. Your soulmate whispered, "I thought they were scared to dream bigger." The psychic's answer came softly. Maybe they were learning to dream in a way they could sustain. That sentence changed something. Because your soulmate suddenly remembered one of your arguments. They had once asked why you could not simply take a bigger chance. Why every decision needed so much thought. Why you seemed determined to have a backup plan before allowing yourself to enjoy the first plan. You became unusually quiet. Then you said, "Because I know what it feels like when one problem becomes 5. At the time, your soulmate thought you were being negative. Now the sentence opened. It was not pessimism. It was memory. At some point, you had learned how quickly one unexpected expense, one family responsibility, one missed opportunity, or one badly timed decision could ripple outward. You were not trying to create a life with no uncertainty. You were trying to create enough margin that uncertainty would no longer control every decision. For someone watching from the outside, that could look slow. For someone who had lived through instability, it could feel like freedom. Your soulmate lowered the phone. "I judged them for this." The psychic said nothing. "I thought they weren't moving fast enough." Still nothing. "I thought maybe they didn't want the same kind of future I wanted." The third party looked toward them. "What do you think now?" Your soulmate stared at the 3 handwritten words on the receipt. "For the quiet future." Their voice trembled. "I think they wanted it so much that they were afraid to build it carelessly." The realization carried warmth into the room. Then another detail disturbed it. Your soulmate suddenly remembered something that did not fit. "If they were building toward us," they said, "why did they pull away afterward?" The psychic's eyes lifted. There was the deeper contradiction. Because the sacrifice explained generosity. The receipt explained your definition of stability. The messages explained some of your silence. None of it explained why, after giving up something meaningful during a difficult period, you became harder to reach. Your soulmate had spent months believing that distance meant your feelings weakened. Now that explanation looked incomplete. The psychic asked, "What happened immediately after the plan was postponed?" Your soulmate searched their memory. "They worked more." "How much more?" "A lot." "And how did you respond?" The question landed heavily. Your soulmate stared down at the phone. "I complained." Not cruelly. Not unfairly, perhaps. They missed you. They wanted reassurance. They did not know what was happening behind the scenes. So they reacted to what they could see. Calls became shorter. Plans became less spontaneous. Your energy was divided. Eventually your soulmate asked whether you still cared. And because you were tired, proud, and probably overwhelmed, you answered badly. Of course I care. I just can't explain everything right now. The sentence had caused damage. Your soulmate heard secrecy. You may have meant pressure. They heard rejection. You may have meant, I am trying not to fall apart while fixing what I can. The psychic folded her hands. This is where good intentions stop being enough. Your soulmate looked up. A person can care deeply and still communicate poorly. Sacrifice does not automatically make every choice healthy. Perhaps this person thought carrying everything alone protected the relationship. It may have done the opposite. That honesty mattered. Because the reading was no longer turning you into some flawless figure. It was showing both sides of the same trait. The instinct that made you dependable could also make you disappear into responsibility. The desire not to burden people could prevent them from understanding you. The habit of rebuilding privately could leave someone who loved you standing outside the construction site, wondering whether anything was being built at all. Your soulmate wiped their eyes. I wish they had told me. The psychic nodded. Maybe someday that is the conversation worth having. Not an accusation. Not a demand for proof. A conversation. What were you carrying? Why did you believe you had to carry it alone? And why did someone who wanted a quiet future with another person keep trying to prepare for it without allowing that person to understand the cost? The third party exhaled slowly. So we came here to expose someone. The psychic finished gently. And instead you found a misunderstanding. That was the second answer. The title of the story, in your soulmate's mind, had changed. They had entered wondering whether your entire image was fake. Now they were confronting something more uncomfortable. Maybe the false thing had been the interpretation built around your silence. Yet one question remained untouched. Why had the psychic become emotional when she first saw the receipt? Your soulmate finally asked. When you looked at this earlier, you reacted before we told you any of these stories. The psychic's face grew still. Yes. What did you notice? She looked at the faded paper. Not something supernatural. The third party leaned forward. Then what? The amount. Everyone looked down. It was small. So small that neither of them understood. The meal had not been expensive. Your soulmate almost laughed from confusion. That? No. Look beneath it. The receipt was old, and part of the printing had faded. Under the total was another number written lightly in pen. Your soulmate squinted. Then they recognized your handwriting again. A subtraction. One amount minus another. Beside it, a much smaller figure. The psychic pointed. Do you know what these numbers were? Your soulmate shook their head. The third party took the receipt and turned it toward the lamp. The calculation was simple. An amount you apparently had, minus the cost of something, leaving almost nothing. Your soulmate's expression collapsed. They remembered that week. Not every detail. Enough. You had told them things were a little tight. They had assumed you meant you were being cautious. The calculation suggested otherwise. You had paid for that ordinary meal on a week when doing so actually mattered to you. Not because the meal itself was some grand sacrifice. Because you had wanted one evening to feel normal. One evening where nobody discussed stress. One evening where your soulmate did not have to watch you calculate whether kindness fit into the budget. The psychic spoke quietly. This is the detail that changed my interpretation. Your soulmate could barely look away from the numbers. You could have said no, they whispered, as though speaking directly to the version of you sitting across from them that night. You could have chosen somewhere cheaper. You could have admitted the week was difficult. You could have allowed another person to pay. Instead, you checked the total twice, smiled, and changed the subject. That was why they remembered the gesture now. Not because spending money proves love. It does not. But because your behavior revealed the complicated way you handled care. You were willing to inconvenience yourself quietly. Sometimes too quietly. Your soulmate's tears returned. This time the third party did not interrupt. Several minutes passed. Then another memory surfaced. Your soulmate opened a different message. I asked them later why they looked worried that night. What did they say? The psychic asked. Your soulmate read the old reply. Just figuring some things out. 3 ordinary words. At the time, almost irritating. Now painfully clear. They pressed the phone against their chest. I thought they didn't trust me enough to tell me. The psychic's voice softened. Maybe they didn't know how. That possibility hurt in a different way. Because being loved by someone did not automatically mean that person knew how to be vulnerable. Sometimes a person could offer practical support far more easily than admitting, I am afraid. Sometimes they could solve everyone else's problems while hiding their own. Sometimes their deepest idea of providing was built on a private promise that nobody around them even knew existed. The third party looked at the numbers again. Do you think that's what the quiet future meant? Partly, the psychic said. Partly? She turned toward your soulmate. There is still something you haven't told me. Your soulmate's brow tightened. What? The phrase itself. For the quiet future. You said the two of you had talked about what it meant. But when you described that conversation, you told me what this person wanted. The psychic paused.